The chandelier above the dining table shimmered like ice, scattering sharp fragments of light across crystal glasses and polished silverware. Laughter echoed through the crowded family room, except it wasn't the warm kind. It was directed at me. My sister Serena raised her champagne glass, her voice slicing through the air like a violin played off-key. "Still single at your age? Tell me, what's there to be proud of?" The room erupted, smirks, whispers. Even the cousins who once clung to me as children now avoided my eyes, afraid of being pulled into my humiliation. Serena leaned back in her chair, lips curled in triumph, savoring every drop of my embarrassment. She thought this was her victory, that she had finally crushed me. But as her laughter rang in my ears, a thought settled inside me like steel. She doesn't know what's coming. The night she believed would define me would one day define her downfall. When people see me now, they assume I've always been calm, composed, unshakable. The truth is, I wasn't born that way. I was forged that way. My name is Elena, 32 years old, teacher by profession, caretaker by nature. My days were simple. Mornings filled with chalk dust and children's voices, afternoons grading papers at a desk that wobbled, evenings cooking meals for one. Some nights I found comfort in the quiet. Other nights it felt like silence was a punishment I hadn't earned. My family didn't see me as responsible or grounded. No. To them, those words were just softer synonyms for boring in their eyes. The real star was my younger sister Serena. She was the golden one, sharp-tongued, quick-witted, and always dressed in designer outfits that caught the light. At family parties, she glided through rooms like she owned the air itself, while I hovered near the edges, balancing plates, helping serve, refilling glasses. It had always been this way. Growing up, I learned that my role in the family was invisible glue. I was the one who remembered birthdays, baked cakes from scratch, and sat up with Mom during her migraines. Serena was the one who arrived late, with stories so dramatic they made everyone forget I had even been there from the beginning. Favoritism wasn't subtle in our house. It was celebrated. Serena's trophies lined the mantel. My certificates were tucked away in drawers. When I saved money from tutoring to buy Dad a watch for his 50th birthday, he smiled politely. But when Serena surprised him with a flashy leather jacket using Mom's credit card, the entire table clapped. I swallowed those small stings, telling myself, it's family. Let it go. But those stings add up, like tiny cuts you ignore until you realize you're bleeding. One memory still sits like a shard in my chest. It was 2 years before the night of this single insult. Serena and I were standing in the kitchen during Christmas Eve. I had just finished roasting the turkey, hours of basting and checking, when she sauntered in wearing a red velvet dress that sparkled with sequins. Without lifting a finger, she leaned on the counter and smirked. "You really love playing house, don't you? Like, cooking and cleaning makes you important." Before I could answer, Mom walked in. She looked at Serena, not at the turkey, not at me. "Darling, you look like a star," she gushed. In that moment, my effort vanished, invisible again. The family gathered around the glowing tree, lights reflecting in Serena's eyes like flames. I sat on the couch, quiet, a paper plate balanced on my lap, and when Serena opened her gift, a designer clutch Mom said she'd been saving up for, she squealed. Meanwhile, my gift was a scented candle, still wrapped in discount store plastic. A candle for the girl who lit the house every day. I remember holding it, smiling, pretending I didn't notice, pretending the wax smell didn't sting more than smoke in my lungs. That was Serena's power. She didn't just want the spotlight. She wanted to make sure I stayed in the shadows. And I let her. For years, I let her. Because I thought that was what love looked like. Until the party. The one where she laughed at my single status in front of everyone. That night was different. The sting didn't fade, it burned. I didn't know it then, but that humiliation would be the spark that turned everything upside down. Because when you push the quiet one too far, you awaken something they can never put back to sleep. After the single jab at the family party, something shifted between Serena and me. She sensed weakness the way sharks sense blood in water, and from that night on, she circled me closer. Her comments grew sharper, her smirks more venomous. At Sunday brunch, she leaned across the table with that signature grin. "Must be nice, Elena, not having kids to worry about. You can just waste time on hobbies no one cares about." Laughter erupted. Dad chuckled, shaking his head like Serena's cruelty was charm. Mom scolded her softly, but her eyes glittered with pride. Serena was entertaining, and that was all that mattered. The others followed her lead. Cousins repeated her jokes. Uncles asked me mockingly if I had finally joined Tinder. My presence became a running punchline. Every word chipped away at me. Nights grew longer. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the silence broken only by the hum of the fridge. Serena's voice echoed in my head. Still single. Hobbies no one cares about. Playing house. Sleep didn't come easily, and when it did, it came with dreams of being trapped, running through endless hallways with doors slamming in my face. By morning, the toll showed in my reflection. Dark circles under my eyes, lips bitten raw, shoulders heavy like I carried the whole family's expectations on my back. Still, I tried to rise above. I poured my energy into my students, the one place I felt valued. When a child's eyes lit up after finally solving a math problem, it reminded me I mattered somewhere. That small flame kept me going. But Serena wasn't satisfied with mocking me. She wanted everyone to see me crumble. Rumors began trickling through family gatherings. A cousin whispered that Serena had told them I was too controlling to ever keep a man. Another hinted that she'd said I was bitter because she had everything I didn't. Even neighbors chimed in. One morning, while walking to my car, Mrs. Patel from next door leaned over the hedge and said, "Don't let what Serena said bother you, dear." Some women find happiness in other ways. I froze. What Serena said? My private humiliation had spilled into the street. Isolation crept in like fog. I avoided gatherings, skipped phone calls, let unanswered texts pile up. It seemed the more I shrank away, the stronger Serena grew. She was winning. Or at least, that's what I thought, until one quiet afternoon at school. It was a Wednesday. The classroom smelled faintly of chalk and pencil shavings. I stayed late, hunched over stacks of papers, red pen in hand. The sun had already dipped, leaving the room in a wash of amber shadows. That's when the knock came. "Miss Elena?" I looked up. Standing in the doorway was Lydia, one of my fellow teachers. She was usually quiet, a background presence in staff meetings. But that day she stepped inside, holding a mug of tea. "You look tired," she said softly, placing the cup on my desk. I forced a smile. "Grading never ends." She tilted her head. "It's not just grading, is it?" Something in her tone, gentle but certain, cracked the wall I'd built around myself. Before I knew it, I was telling her pieces of the truth. How my sister belittled me. How the family joined in. How it felt like suffocating in plain sight. Lydia listened without flinching. No judgment, no pity, just presence. And then she said words I hadn't heard in years. "You're not the problem. You're the target." The room went still. My chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from relief. Relief that someone finally saw me. She leaned closer. "People like your sister. They feed on silence. Don't let her write your story." For the first time in months, I felt air rush into my lungs like freedom. That night, walking home under the streetlights, her words echoed in my mind. "Don't let her write your story." I didn't know exactly how yet, but I realized something vital. Serena wanted me isolated, cornered, powerless. But I wasn't completely alone anymore. And that was the first time someone reminded me I wasn't alone. The allyship with Lydia gave me strength, but it also painted a target on my back. Serena could sense the shift. She was used to my silence, my bowed head, my easy surrender. But now, when she mocked me, I didn't always flinch. When she whispered rumors, I didn't always hide. I carried myself differently, and that unsettled her. She decided to remind me who held the power. It started with money. At Dad's birthday dinner, Serena announced loudly that she had helped pay for the catering and decorations. Then, glancing at me, she added, "Some of us contribute. Others just show up." The words hung like smoke, choking me. I wanted to shout that I had slipped Mom money weeks earlier to help with the bills, but I kept quiet. Serena knew I wouldn't humiliate our parents with financial truth. She counted on my silence to protect her lies. And then came the family meeting. We hadn't had one in years, but Serena convinced Dad to call it. Everyone gathered in the living room, voices buzzing, the air thick with tension. Serena stood at the center like a prosecutor before a jury. Her lipstick was blood red, her heels clicking against the tile as she paced. "Look, I'm just saying what everyone already knows," she began. "Elena has no direction. No husband, no family of her own. She hides in her classroom while the rest of us carry real responsibilities." Gasps, murmurs, a few nods. I felt the room tilt. My cousins avoided my gaze. Even Mom's face tightened with something like shame. Dad cleared his throat. "Serena, maybe that's too harsh." "No, Dad," Serena interrupted. "Someone has to say it. Elena needs to stop leeching off this family and grow up. We've all talked about it privately." The words sliced me open. Leeching. After everything I'd sacrificed, every hour I'd spent caring for Mom, every dollar slipped into household expenses. She dared to call me that. For a moment, I thought I might break, that my knees would buckle, that I'd collapse into the very role she wanted me to play, weak, voiceless, humiliated. But something stopped me. A memory. The piggy bank on my dresser. It wasn't just coins, it was receipts, proof of every contribution I'd made. Quietly, over the years, I had tucked them away, thinking one day I might need them. Gas bills I'd covered, grocery lists I'd paid for, even the rent envelope from when Dad had been short 2 months in a row. I straightened my shoulders. My voice came out calm, steady. "Serena," I said, "if you want to talk about responsibility, let's talk about receipts." Her smirk faltered. "I've kept records," I continued. "Every dollar I've spent to keep this family afloat. While you flashed credit cards and played princess, I carried weight you'll never admit." The room fell silent. For the first time, Serena's confidence cracked. Her eyes darted, lips twitching, hands flexing nervously at her sides. She hadn't expected resistance. But true to form, she didn't back down. She doubled down. "Records?" she scoffed, though her voice shook. "Wow, how petty can you get? Who does that? No one cares about your little pity receipts, Elena. You're obsessed, pathetic, desperate to prove you matter." She turned to the family, regaining her rhythm. "This is what I mean. She clings to scraps." Meanwhile, I live in the real world. The room buzzed again, divided. Some leaned toward her, others toward me. But in that moment, I realized something. Serena wasn't invincible. She bled when pressed. And if she thought receipts were just scraps, she hadn't yet seen the real evidence I was holding. That night, as I slipped the piggy bank from my dresser and sifted through its contents, my hands shook. Not from fear this time, but from resolve. She thought she had the family, the spotlight, the control. But I had something she didn't expect. Proof. And proof, when revealed at the right time, could topple even the loudest empire. "They thought they still had control," I whispered to myself in the dark. They didn't. After the family meeting, things didn't quiet down. They erupted. Serena's smirk that night wasn't just for show. It was strategy. Within days, whispers spread faster than smoke. At church, an old family friend patted my arm and said with syrupy pity, "Don't worry, Elena." Some women just aren't meant for family life. At the grocery store, Mrs. Patel, again, leaned close and whispered, "I heard you've been keeping track of your parents' money. That's dangerous, dear. Family should trust family." I froze. Serena hadn't just twisted my words, she'd poisoned them. Now, I wasn't just single or boring. I was obsessive, controlling, untrustworthy. Her campaign worked. At gatherings, relatives sat closer to her side of the table. When I entered a room, conversations hushed. Even the children, once eager for my attention, looked to Serena for permission before approaching me. It was a smear campaign, and I was the villain in her story. Nights turned heavier. My body bore the weight, headaches that pulsed behind my eyes, nausea that crept into meals, insomnia that left me staring at shadows until dawn. Some mornings I looked at my reflection and hardly recognized the woman in the mirror. But I didn't crumble. Not this time. Because Serena wasn't the only one gathering her forces. I had begun gathering mine. Lydia became more than just a sympathetic ear. She was a strategist. Over tea in her cozy apartment, walls lined with books, the faint scent of lavender in the air, she leaned forward and said, "You're not crazy for keeping receipts. You're smart. Documentation is power." Her words lit something inside me. For years I thought my habit of tucking away bills and notes was neurotic. But now I realized it was preparation, so I leaned into it. I bought folders, labeled them meticulously, groceries paid, utilities covered, medical bills, household repairs. Every scrap of evidence went inside. I even printed text messages, times Serena had promised to pay me back, times she'd begged for help, times she'd mocked me in writing. Each folder felt heavier than paper. It felt like armor. The piggy bank that once sat quietly on my dresser became a symbol of something greater. Not just savings, but truth. Proof that I wasn't invisible. Proof that my sacrifices had weight, even if my family refused to see them. And as I built my case, I noticed something I hadn't before. Serena was cracking. She became louder at parties, more aggressive in her mockery. She interrupted people mid-sentence, forced laughter, drank more wine than usual. Her confidence looked less like a crown and more like a mask slipping out of place. The louder she grew, the more I realized she was afraid. Still, she didn't slow down. She spread rumors that I was jealous of her, that I wanted to outshine her. She even told Mom I had been bad-mouthing her parenting, something I'd never do. Mom confronted me with watery eyes, asking, "Why would you say such things, Elena?" It broke me, but it also hardened me. Serena wasn't just attacking me anymore, she was dismantling the bonds that held our family together. That's when I knew this wasn't about sibling rivalry. It was war. I prepared like a soldier. I started therapy, learning to steady my breathing when her words pierced too deep. I built alliances quietly, confiding in 2 cousins who remembered the times I had bailed them out of trouble. I didn't ask them to take sides. I simply reminded them of the truth. And I worked. Every day I worked on myself, eating better, sleeping more, speaking with calmness instead of defensiveness, because I knew the day was coming. The day Serena would push too far. The day when all my folders, all my proof, all my quiet strength would no longer stay hidden. The family thought the war was entertainment, whispers over dinner, gossip on phone calls. They didn't realize it was building to something bigger. But I knew. And as I slid the final folder into my desk drawer, my hand trembling with both fear and anticipation, I whispered to myself, "The day of reckoning is coming, and no one can stop it." It happened on a Sunday afternoon. The family gathered in the community hall for what was supposed to be a cheerful reunion. Tables lined with food, children chasing balloons, elders sitting in their usual circle. But beneath the chatter, I felt the crackle of something electric. Serena had orchestrated this moment. She floated through the room in a silk dress, lips painted a crimson smile, pulling people close to whisper in their ears. I could feel the heat of her glances, the satisfaction of a predator preparing its final strike. At the head of the room, Dad tapped a spoon against his glass. "Everyone, settle down." Serena stepped forward before he could continue. She held the floor like a queen addressing her subjects. "I called this meeting," she announced, voice dripping with honey, "because we need to be honest about what's holding this family back. And frankly," her eyes locked on me, "it's Elena." The room hushed. She circled slowly, savoring every second. She hoards receipts, like some accountant of misery. She tells anyone who'll listen that she's the one keeping this family alive. It's toxic and pathetic, and I won't let her drag us all down anymore. Gasps. A few mutters of agreement. The trap was closing. I rose from my chair. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. "Serena," I said, calm as a still lake, "you've had your say." "Now it's my turn," she smirked, expecting me to sputter and collapse under the weight of her accusations. Instead, I reached for the leather folder at my side. I opened it. Papers gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Receipts, bills, bank slips, printed texts, all carefully organized. I laid them on the table one by one, the sound of paper hitting wood sharp as gunshots. "This," I said evenly, "is every dollar I've spent for this family over the last 10 years. Groceries when Mom was sick, rent when Dad fell short, medical bills when Serena lost her insurance, and yes, every promise Serena made to pay me back but never did." The room froze. I picked up a text printout, my voice steady. "Here's one from you, Serena. Please cover me again. I'll pay you back next month." That was 3 years ago. Still waiting. Her smirk faltered. A bead of sweat rolled down her temple. Silence spread like wildfire. Even the children stopped moving. All eyes were on her. Serena laughed weakly. "So what? You keep scraps of paper and think that makes you better? That doesn't mean anything." I met her gaze. "It means everything. Because the truth isn't in your words, Serena. It's in the proof." I turned to the family. My voice grew sharper, stronger. For years, I've been invisible. I cooked, I cleaned, I paid. And still I was mocked for being single, for being boring, for being less. But the truth is, I placed my hand firmly on the stack of receipts. I gave more than anyone here ever cared to admit. The room was silent, heavy, charged. Serena's face twisted. Her hands trembled as she tried to laugh it off. "You're insane, Elena. You're obsessed." But the family wasn't looking at me like I was insane. They were looking at her shaking hands, at her cracked mask, at the empire of lies collapsing around her. Finally, I spoke the words that had lived in my chest for years. "I don't want apologies," I said, my voice echoing in the stunned hall. "I want change." The silence afterward wasn't empty. It was full of truth that could no longer be denied. And in the middle of it stood Serena, trembling, her smile shattered, her kingdom gone. The silence that followed my words hung heavy in the room, like smoke after a fire. For once, Serena had nothing to say. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The laughter she used to weaponize against me had evaporated, leaving only trembling hands and eyes darting, desperate for someone, anyone, to save her. But no one moved. Even Dad, who so often defended her, leaned back in his chair, shoulders sagging under the weight of truth. Mom's face was pale, her eyes glistening, not with pride for Serena this time, but with shame. The cousins avoided her gaze. The uncles cleared their throats. The aunts whispered. Serena, the golden girl, had been stripped of her shine. The days that followed were different. Phone calls that once went unanswered were now returned quickly. Relatives who had mocked me suddenly spoke softly, careful with their words. A few even apologized, clumsy, half-hearted, but apologies nonetheless. But I wasn't interested in their guilt. For the first time, I was interested in me. I moved into a new apartment on the edge of town, a small place but filled with sunlight and quiet. I planted herbs on the windowsill, cooked meals just for myself, let music play without fear of judgment. The silence, once suffocating, now felt like peace. Teaching felt different too. I walked into my classroom with my head higher, my voice stronger. My students noticed. "You look happier, Ms. Elena," one said, and I realized I wasn't living in Serena's shadow anymore. As for her, the fallout was swift. With her lies exposed, relatives grew wary of her. Invitations stopped. The laughter that once followed her now sounded forced. She still strutted, still spoke loudly, but the mask had cracks no one could unsee. Her power was gone, not because I destroyed her, but because she destroyed herself when truth came to light. One evening I pulled the old piggy bank from my shelf, the little ceramic jar that had once held my secret. Receipts, scraps, proof of all I'd carried. This time it was filled with something new. $2 bills, dozens of them, folded neatly. My students had given them as small thank yous over the years, and I'd kept them as tokens of gratitude. What once symbolized burden now symbolized worth, not the worth my family denied me, but the worth I claimed for myself. I placed the piggy bank on a new shelf, framed by sunlight. No longer hidden, no longer secret. A reminder, my quiet had weight. My silence had power. My story mattered. I thought back to that night, the chandelier, the laughter, Serena's cruel words. "Still single at your age? What's there to be proud of?" I smiled, because now I had the answer. What's there to be proud of? Everything. That moment of public humiliation wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of boundaries, of self-respect, of choosing myself. And as I looked around my new home, sunlight spilling across the walls, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Maybe you faced it too. Favoritism, betrayal, or the kind of abuse that hides behind smiles and laughter. Maybe you've been mocked for who you are, dismissed for what you give, or made to feel invisible in your own family. If you have, I want you to know this. You are not alone, and you are not powerless. Your worth isn't defined by the people who overlook you. It's defined by the strength you carry, the truth you hold, and the way you rise when no one expects you to. So tell me, how did you rise above it? Share your story in the comments. Let this be a place where silence breaks and voices matter. Because worth isn't something they give you. It's something you claim for yourself.